Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, crypto nerds of all ages, I welcome you back once again. Thank you for tuning in. Today, we are talking about bridges. And so far in the Algorand ecosystem, we've heard talk about bridges. We've heard chatter about bridges, but nobody has done it to the extent that our next guest wants to make this happen. So please welcome David, the CEO and founder of Glitter.finance. Stay tuned after the break. All right, David, thank you so much for joining us today. The Crypto Nerd channel is glad that we've had a few starts and stops along the way, but it's happening now. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Again, good to be here.
Yeah. So for those of us who maybe aren't quite as familiar with what Glitter Finance is doing, can you give us like the big overall,
Sure.
kind of sense of what's going on over there?
Sure. Glitter is a cross-chain bridge ecosystem. Currently, we're supporting Algorand and Solana. And in the future, we're planning to also integrate various chains from the Cosmos ecosystem to bridge Cosmos to Algorand,
Mhm.
and eventually also develop our own blockchain based on Cosmos.
Excellent. Did I see Polygon in there at some point as well?
Yeah, we were thinking about working with Polygon. However, we are really focused on a non-EM compatible ecosystem. We kind of feel like we'll start with Algo and Solana, and we just want to continue working in that particular direction because we feel it's, first of all, it's more difficult, and
Mhm.
because it's more difficult, we feel it brings a lot more value to the consumers, to the users of blockchains. So we ultimately are deciding to go towards the non-EVM compatible world. Let's put it that way.
Got it. Understood. All right. So, give us a sense before we jump into the purpose of bridges and sort of the big picture there. The honest wants to know. I got some questions just about you. How did you come into the space? How did you come to be the founder of Glitter? What was your background there?
Sure. So it was kind of an unlikely story of me in general coming into blockchain. I was actually a musician from the age of 5 to the age of 27,
Wow.
classical violinist. And, in my mid 20s, I started to kind of pivot toward business. And once I decided to move on, I started to work in technology companies, and then eventually went corporate. And so my main specialization was working as a business development guy, often connecting engineers and highly engineered products to buyers, basically, seeing how to market them, seeing how to sell them, how to tell their story.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of was what I did. And then, eventually, due to various, market forces, I ended up, getting into blockchain. I was hired by a blockchain marketing and development company.
Hmm.
Very slowly learned what blockchain was, because I'm not an engineer. So it was very much kind of like joining a techie club. And so, I mean, it took me a
Yeah, very
while
much.
to kind of understand what was going on. Eventually, I built up a network, created my own agency that later I converted into an incubator. Had experience founding a couple of startups in DeFi. I was very attracted to DeFi because I thought that here's this incredible opportunity to revolutionize money.
Hmm.
Something that hasn't changed in thousands of years, and something which is, probably one of the top three problems facing humanity. So
Right.
it's incredibly exciting and it's incredibly interesting. And so I kind of got into it, and trial and error, trial and error. Eventually, you kind of learn what's important, what works, what doesn't work. And so, after a while, I was a consultant in blockchain, and then I founded Glitter in July of last year. And basically, that's where the initial idea was to create a bridge between actually Ethereum and Solana.
Hmm.
But I knew the Algorand technology. I knew the ecosystem. I used to live in the Boston area, and I thought, here's a really great ecosystem that really needs interoperability, that has this incredibly stable product. high quality blockchain product with really good speeds and really really high level community, why not bring that? Why not bring the project from Ethereum to Algo and try to
Mhm.
connect Algo to Solana? And so that's how Glitter was born, and it also is a story of how I joined blockchain.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I find a lot of people have that right brain, left brain. They have that creative foundation. Whether or not it's a lot of authors. So I met a poet the other day. Songwriters, musicians. A lot of folks who have those creative foundations are able to jump into a space like this because I find that blockchain has it's almost like a blank slate. You can really like envision something, and you are encouraged in this space to do what's not been done before, if that makes sense. Whereas if you go
Yeah,
into traditional business, you're more likely to get put into that box. If you join that, you said that corporate world, it's much more like, do you fit these norms? Here's what's happened before, and it's much harder to break outside of those boundaries. uh, so
exactly.
it's been about a year now for you. Probably
Yes.
ups and
Mhm.
downs. What was the hardest part about getting liftoff? Really, just kind of getting that initial momentum, out of the gate.
Well, there were many moments, to be honest with you. Obviously, every startup starts up as an idea that you first pitch to investors trying to get your first funding.
Hmm.
So that's the first hurdle that you have to overcome if you're actually going to build something and build a company. So for me, that was a good 2-3 months where I was just mass emailing, spamming VCs, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So that was the first kind of accomplishment, just to get it lift off. Then finding the right developers was very important, and then eventually learning how to message the startup properly. And so all of those challenges have been overcome,
Hmm.
and luckily now we're coming very close to mainnet.
Yeah, excellent. Any quick advice based on your experience for the last year, especially getting that initial investor and those relationships up and going? If you could go back and do it again, what would you tell your younger self, or that new person that's out there looking for their first interaction with a VC, and probably had never had any activities like that before, probably brand new to that activity.
I think what I would tell myself is something that I knew then, difficult to implement, and that takes legitimate experience to be able to do properly, which is always come from a point of balance. Every decision has to come from a point of balance. It's extremely important not to jump on anything too quickly, not to jump to conclusions, not to act rashly, but rather really calm down, try to assess the situation,
Yeah.
and move in a calm way. That sense of balance is going to go into the business, and ultimately speaking, a lot of successes comes from that, being able to
Hmm.
just balance yourself and make decisions that are appropriate within the moment rather than let's say our own craziness or preconceptions or insecurities.
Yeah, it's very easy. If you've got this new startup, this new idea, and it's your baby, right? It's very
Yeah,
easy to have knee-jerk reactions or to get overly excited that somebody else thinks your baby looks cute, and so you get very excited or very hurt if somebody says no, that's an ugly baby, and so
yeah,
there's a lot of emotion embedded with the whole startup mentality. I think it's
absolutely.
good and bad, but that's solid advice. Take a minute,
Yes.
deep breaths, and have some balance, as you said
Well,
there.
if I may, I mean, human beings make all decisions based on emotions.
Hmm.
That's what we are. We're emotional beings. We always tell ourselves that we make decisions based on intellect, but intellect at the end of the day is just a tool, very often to justify our emotions.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that's why it's so tricky, because the investors quite often invest based on emotions, and your reaction of on whether they choose to invest or not is also emotional. So,
Right.
you know,
So it could be a you just have to take some moment there to understand the levity of the situation and move on.
exactly,
Well,
exactly.
let's move on. So I appreciate you kind of giving us a little behind the scenes look at what it was like to get up on off the ground. Let's move on
Mhm.
to your primary product, which seems like the mainnet that's coming on board now. between Solana and
Hmm.
Algorand. I think we're a couple of weeks away, hopefully this month anyway, of bringing that on board. Can you talk to me about just in simple terms, why are bridges important for particularly for the Algorand ecosystem?
Well, I mean, bridges connect data, information, and people. It's a very simple thing. you
Hmm.
know Connection, whether you look at it historically through, human development equals trade, equals interaction, equals different ideas and technologies permeating different societies and people. I look at all blockchain ecosystems as a kind of quasi internet based societies, really.
Hmm.
You can really tell that different blockchains attract different type of personalities.
They really do,
Um,
yeah.
it is the way it is. It's, you can almost look at them as like city independent. I don't want to call cities, because cities you can have many different people. But again, I think the kind of calling them societies does work. There's certain
Hmm.
societies built on certain precepts that certain people believe are correct,
Hmm.
and so you build a society around the blockchain. you know
Hmm.
and in the age of the internet, that makes sense, because internet is what connects everybody. You can have
Hmm.
a global society, but then what you build it around is what defines what that society is.
Hmm.
So when you look at bridges connect these societies. They allow for the transfer of knowledge, information, understanding, to kind of permeate these blockchains. And that's incredibly important, because in the age of connectivity, technology and society cannot exist in a vacuum, right? You have to have this, constant give and take and back and forth.
Right.
And so I think that's why bridges are pivotal for the continuation of blockchain. For Algorand in particular, well, it's a society, right? And it wants to evolve. I feel that Algorand went from kind of a blockchain that was designed to be enterprise grade, for infrastructure. Let's say this is what I associated Algorand with.
Yeah, very much so.
To trying to, and in many ways it still is, an infrastructure blockchain. But I feel that it is slowly kind of coming into the DeFi sector. This idea of the revolution around money,
Hmm.
and Algo wants to be, join the game, and Algo is part of the game. But when you're there, you also want information to go back and forth, because you want fresh ideas, you want
Hmm.
fresh experiences, those things that create inspiration and allow for, for you to evolve, for you to move forward. And so that's why, this is why a bridge is so important to Algorand in particular.
I think it's you touched on something there, that Algorand is very much seen as sort of the infrastructure type of chain. And it's hard to talk about the infrastructure behind the scenes, the being the backbone of a system, in like sexy terms. Like it doesn't get a lot of hype. It doesn't get a lot of
Define sexy.
airplay, right? Like for the end user, right? For
Right.
people using it, people in the industry, the enterprise users, it's very appealing because it's reliable, it's consistent, it's cheap, it's effective. Those kinds of things are attractive. But you're right, the end user doesn't get to see that as much, at least until recently. There's been a much more of a push, I think, from Algorand to attract end users, just common holders. And there have been a core of us for a while, but to see it start to explode and really expand with additional marketing, I think is good. And we need folks like you who will try to attract those end users, maybe from Solana, and bring them over, or maybe from the Cosmos ecosystem, and just to share in, here's what we've got over here. You can have a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You don't have to be totally exclusive. That's all we're looking for right now. We just want some cross pollination, I think is a good word. Like when we talk about a bridge and we're sharing data, a lot of people are confused. They're just like, well, why wouldn't people, like, you could just go to an exchange and trade for something for Algorand, but what purpose does that do? Why is the bridge different? Why would we wrap something, or why would we bring any protocols over, or why is that so important, and why does that attract additional end users? Can you expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah, in emotional terms, because when you wrap an asset, It's a lot more authentic, of a representation and a feeling of an asset from a foreign ecosystem
Hmm.
that is now in your ecosystem.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with psychology and emotional perception again. Um, yes, you can do a dry swap. It doesn't. I think emotionally, it doesn't fulfill that need to feel like, well, this was foreign and now it's here.
Hmm.
Whoa, what do I do with this now? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I think when you have a wrapped asset, it both gives the end user in the ecosystem that it receives the wrapped asset both a sense of control, but also a sense of like, we can play with this now.
Hmm.
Maybe this is not as scary or weird as we thought it was.
It's slightly familiar, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it feels like their old asset, but it's new and it has some new functionality, and so there's that
Exactly.
familiarity there. I
Exactly.
think
And
that emotion's good.
I think that there's certain types of people that are more mathematically based and perhaps more precise. They will always want a swap mechanism,
Mhm.
more something like one, like exactly one to one. It has to be like certain kind of thing. But I think a lot of users really do want that emotional feeling of playing with what used to be foreign that now maybe isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that what in reality a wrapped asset does is that it encourages people who are maximalists for a specific ecosystem to
Hmm.
start to play around with that foreign asset and maybe explore it in a new ecosystem and then come back. So I think that's what the bridge is. I think the bridge bridges mentalities first and foremost. It bridges our preconceptions and what we're used to,
Hmm.
and then allows us to then expand by
Excellent.
making it less offensive to us, to less foreign. Let's put it this way. In other words, let's kill xenophobia.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. We want to be welcoming, right? Um,
exactly.
Speaking of being welcoming, so the first users, the first folks that use the bridge, what's the use case? What are they going to do when they get over here? How do they? What's the application like?
Well, I mean, in terms of the use case, I can tell you from the Algorand side, there's a lot of protocols that want to be bridged to Solana. So
Hmm.
their use case is, we want to get ourselves over there and see what happens,
Hmm.
and see, like, what happens when the Algorand protocols go to Sol and we get listed on a DEX there,
Hmm.
and what happens when those gamers from Sol start to trade Algorand protocols.
Hmm.
I think that's the use case. I think it's a true kind of like, let's try it out. It's an exploration. That's the use case, and it also is very much expanding your user base, expanding the public's knowledge of what you're building.
Hmm.
That's from the Algorand side. From the Solana side, I think the main use case would be something like, okay, so we come from this gamer ecosystem, this wild gamer ecosystem, with
Hmm.
this like absolutely wild but extraordinary DeFi culture. It's where some of the most creative minds in DeFi are on Solana, without a question.
Yeah.
Um, and what happens when we get ourselves onto an ecosystem that's all about being more, I mean, I hate to say it, more mature, like more like just being more precise with everything, maybe a little
Hmm.
bit like older crowd, less of a gamer, kind of like more serious people to some extent.
Yeah.
I'm not judging anybody, but I'm saying there are, in Algorand, people that have a slightly different mentality.
Hmm.
So what happens when we get our product and we basically kind of send it over to this ecosystem that's in many ways kind of the opposite of what we're used to?
Hmm.
And what happens then? And I think it's all about interaction of different mentalities and then mixing them. And it ultimately it comes down to expanding your user base, expanding the people that are following your product, seeing what happens, what if,
Yeah.
and connecting to people that you may not necessarily thought that you could connect to easily, but then allowing them to test your product and ultimately creating an exchange of knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's good. Well said. Uh, Let me ask you: are NFTs important to the future of glitter finance?
Well, we were thinking about cross-chaining NFTs.
Mm-hmm.
We are still thinking about it. It's not a primary goal. My personal interest has always been DeFi first.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think of NFTs personally as a system, like a system of value. Like, how do you transfer value? Can you transfer value through a picture? Well, apparently you can.
Yeah.
You know, Again, if you look at the two major crypto innovations of the last 3 years, DeFi. If DeFi has a message, the message is anybody can make money at any time, anywhere, as long as you understand, as long as you can take responsibility and understand the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you look at NFTs, it's almost like an answer from the creatives to that, which is anything can be money. Okay, that's
Mm-hmm.
the rule. The rule is now that a picture of a monkey can be money.
Yeah,
Why? Well, because it can be, because it's fun,
we said it
and
is.
because yeah, because people don't want to be scared of money anymore. So to me, when you look at those two messages, in many ways they're like two sides of one coin. Now, based on that, I am quite interested in integrating NFTs. However, my main interest and focus is still DeFi,
Mm-hmm.
and very much. But within DeFi, it's even more specific, connecting different people.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I find to be interesting. Infrastructure to me is interesting. So,
Do you think the area of DeFi we've seen some huge success there in the last, I don't know, 12 to 24 months. We've also seen some disasters. What
mm,
what do you think is going to happen in the next, I don't know, 2 years or so that will expand DeFi so that it's a little more commonplace and people are more educated so they understand what they're doing, how they're doing it, and I think really that it can't always be buyer beware. It has to be on us at some point to educate folks so that they are comfortable using DeFi in lots of different ways. But what do you think is going to be the catalyst there for maybe, I don't know if it's mass adoption, but just more acceptance there?
I think it's difficult to answer your question. I can tell you what I hope will happen, and what I'm thinking that what has happened will stimulate in people.
Hmm.
I think what was that you had this culture that was both incredibly creative and daring, and also a little bit too froofy,
Mm,
where people thought that I guess, I mean, I hate to say it, but having Ponzi schemes can work in DeFi because it's not the real world,
right.
or something that isn't fully stable is stable because I said so,
Hmm.
or certain things don't work, and the reason they don't work is because regardless of what you would like to believe, people will always be afraid at one point or another, you know. Um, and so one of the things that I think was done really incorrectly in the ecosystem was this positioning of different tokens as some sort of almost like a hot stock. Like, you got to get your hands on this, man, because if you don't, you're just not going to make your $200,000 in the first 5 days. I mean, you got to do it. You got to do it. And so people, were pushing retail investors into this frenzy with this
Hmm.
crazy overhype and crazy over promises and just stupid stuff. And basically, what happened was you got a boom out of it. It exploded because there was too much hype and too little reality behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I'm hoping will happen is that you're going to have less hype, and people will start to look at tokens correctly.
Hmm.
I firmly believe the tokens are commodities. I
Hmm.
think they should not be treated like they're stocks.
Hmm.
They shouldn't be treated like they're lotteries. These are commodities. Algo is a commodity. What does that mean? Commodity is never going to move with the company. So you shouldn't necessarily kind of look at it that way. Commodity is never going to look just because an influencer says it's super cool. Imagine how crazy it is if an influencer goes on YouTube and says, gold, that's an amazing asset. Look, it shines, man. You got to get your hands on gold. Okay,
Right.
great. Right. We're not in ancient Assyria.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, there has to be some like reality seeping in, and people treating these assets as what they actually are, which is commodities. And I think that when you start to have, and I also believe that there should be more stress on actual innovation from the platform. um, Meaning, I feel like too much of the public believes that a platform is being made to make money off of the token,
Mm-hmm.
rather than the platform is being made to disrupt the status quo, and the token is a very nice tool to help you do that. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's a complete inversion of priorities of what really should be. So what I'm hoping will happen is two things. Number one, proper understanding of what a token is, so that people stop doing crazy stuff with them and advertising them in a stupid, crazy way.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
number two, that priorities shift to innovation first, and within the innovation, testing what it is that you're putting out, and then
Mm-hmm.
having a great product out, kind of like the way Algorand was developed, where for many years it was just developed in a quiet way until the thing just worked and worked
Mm-hmm.
well. So I think if those two things happen, then we're going to be in a great shape. And I think what's happening now is that a lot of the people that had maybe priorities that weren't in line with, creating quality, a lot of those people are now getting burned.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is happening. So I'm hoping that there's a flip in the ecosystem, in the crypto world, towards, frankly, more quality and less hype.
Yeah, I agree. I'm hoping that fundamentals play out and people start choosing to spend their fiat in ways that support projects that are solving problems or providing
Yeah,
services that we didn't know we needed before, instead of potential or promises or vaporware, that sort of thing. I agree.
exactly.
So what's next for Glitter? What's the next really cool thing? When mainnet happens, what's the best thing that could happen next for you?
There are many things. There's a lot of stuff in the pipeline, to be honest. We're kind of in a, knock on wood, decent position in spite of the terrible market. We have runway. We're hiring still, in spite of what's happening everywhere. But there's a lot in the pipeline. I mean, we're looking to bridge Cosmos blockchains to Algo. We're looking to also fully decentralize our bridge by creating our own blockchain, and then hopefully creating an ecosystem of that. There's a lot of stuff that we're really looking to grow. Glitter was always a very ambitious project. The bridge itself was just stage one, and really just a way to get started and to get liquidity into the ecosystem, and also hopefully bring actual value to people in ecosystems. But once that first kind of first project is set, there's a lot to build on, and off of Glitter, and to expand it. So yeah, I mean, a lot of very cool stuff that is being planned, and I'm hoping that we're going to get to all of it.
Excellent. Well, we'll be on the lookout for mainnet launch here in the very near future. I will, of course, link all the socials down below. David, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the channel to share some knowledge with us about where Glitter came from, what it's doing right now, and exciting to see what it does in the future. So hopefully we'll have you back on the show in the near future. Okay.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
All right, everybody. As always, I am your crypto nerd.